My name is Sarah Fennel. I'm a food photographer and food blogger, and you are listening to The Go Creative Show.
Hey everyone, my name is Ben Consoli. I am a director and owner of BC Media Productions, and this is the Go Creative Show, the show dedicated to creative professionals in the video production and filmmaking industries. Sarah Fennell is a photographer and founder of Foodtography School, where she teaches her students how to master the skill of food photography. The Go Creative Show is supported by Rule Boston Camera, Buy Rent Create at Rule.com, NewShooter.com, essential news for real-world shooters, Hedge.video, the fastest way to back up media, Shutterstock.com, and PremiumBeat.com. Premium, royalty-free music and sound. Now, I don't know about you, but I have always wanted to become better at food photography. And this is really one of those quintessential Go Creative Show episodes, because this is a tips episode. We're going to teach you how to become a better food photographer, how to light food, how to frame for food photography, how to do the post-production to make your food photography pop. And who better to be on the show than Sarah Fennell from Broma Bakery and Foodtography.school.com. If you are not following her pages, you are missing out on some delicious and incredible photography, that is for sure. And I'm very excited to share our interview with her so you guys can learn some tips and get out there and start shooting better food photography immediately. It's amazing how little simple tips are going to make a huge difference in your photography. But before we get there, I want to talk about Rule Boston Camera. Rule is the place to go to purchase and rent your production equipment. I've done both many, many times. We've been renting the Alexa Mini quite a bit in the past couple of months. It's been super busy in Boston. And here's the thing, Rule has a gigantic inventory. So they have everything that you need. Even when it's busy, like it is right now in Boston, you can always get what you need. Cameras, audio, lighting, grip gear, everything you could imagine is there under their roof. They've been in business for 35 years, over 35 years. They just moved into a giant new facility over in Watertown, Massachusetts, to house all of this ridiculous inventory that they have. But really, when it comes down to it, I keep going back to Rule because the service. Yeah, the service. Because production is mission critical, and Rule has got your back. So you get expert advice and counsel from the very first time you talk with them. You're going to get technical guidance when you take the equipment out for a shoot, and they're committed to support it. So even if you're on location, you can call them. They're going to support that equipment for you. And that gives me peace of mind. And that's why I keep going back. So check them out over at Rule.com, RULE.com. Go rent some stuff. Go buy some stuff. Or just talk to them. They're very friendly. Rule.com, RULE.com. All right, let's get started. Let's dive right in. So much to get to with food photographer Sarah Fennell. So I'm here with Sarah Fennell, food photographer, blogger, chef. I mean, you do amazing, amazing work, and I am so excited to talk to you today because this is an episode about food photography, which we've never done on the Go Creative Show. So thank you so much for being on.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here and talk about my favorite two subjects, food and photography. So
I know, right? I mean, what a fun career you have. I mean, that is just, did you ever imagine you would be working and making a living doing what you do?
Absolutely not. No, I think that's what's so amazing about it is it really is like this dream unicorn job that I feel like I really stumbled into. And I am so excited to wake up every day. And it sounds so cliche, but to wake up every day and just feel really inspired about the work that I do. So it's pretty sweet.
Well, I don't think it sounds cliche because I don't think a lot of people get to say that. Like, that's not something you hear everybody say. And I think we in the production industry, we're lucky that we get to do creative stuff like this on a daily basis. Like, no matter how annoying a client is, no matter how annoying a project is, I mean, let's be honest, we're doing something fun. I mean, it just is what it is.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree with you there. And that's one thing that's so amazing about being in the creative space, because even when you are dealing with a difficult client or a project that you're not super stoked about, there is still this element of creativity that you can bring to the table because you're producing something that, really comes from inside you. And there's something really special about that.
So your website's bromabakery.com and Foodtography School. The text is small here.
Yeah.
Foodtographyschool.com.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about both of those things, but I want to start with Broma Bakery because I was first introduced to you through your dad because I've worked with him a bunch shooting a lot of his project. His name is Fennell. My computer's going. His name is Fennell, and he is a video producer. He used to be a business news reporter for NECN, New England Cable News, and he was kind of like a staple in the news industry in New England. You grew up in sort of on the outskirts of that, media industry. And I'd like to talk to you about that too. But the way I was introduced to you is because we were working together and he's like, oh, my daughter has an Instagram page. She does some photo work or whatever. And honestly, when people say that, it's of course he's going to like his daughter's work. You know what I mean? So I'm like, yeah, okay, cool, whatever. But then I saw it and I was like, wow, there is something there. And I was first introduced to you with Broma Bakery. So I'd love to start there and tell us what it is.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much. Coming from you, that means a lot. So thank you. So Broma Bakery is a mostly baking blog, and it's basically a blog where I share recipes that I develop and I test, and then I photograph myself. So it's funny because I think a lot of people, when they hear this term food blogger, they assume that it's somebody who, writes for any sort of like news outlet and doing reviews. But the food blogging that I do is all about creating recipes and then basically delivering those for free to the world through the internet. So it absolutely was something that started as a hobby for me. I did photography in high school, and it was, just analog photography on a 35 millimeter camera. And I think having that sort of base for photography where we really learned the technical aspects of photography. We learned a bunch of different historical photography movements and all about photography equally as an art, but also as this very technical skill. Made it so that when I transitioned to doing food photography, I was approaching it from a very different angle than I think a lot of my peers were. And so I did photography in high school, and then I went to college, and I was really missing having a creative outlet. And I had a lot of friends. I was at NYU at the time.
What were you studying?
Anthropology.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I thought I wanted to pretty much explore the world, and I thought that anthropology was a way to do that. And I found very quickly that it's not quite the way to do that.
And then you're like, actually, no, wait, I just want to eat and take photos.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And so then the other part of this is my dad sort of brought this visual, creative side out in me. And then my mom was a really good home baker, and she's just like has the biggest sweet tooth and would have cookies and brownies and cakes just all the time for my sister and I when we were little. So it was sort of these two sides where I was like, maybe I can, have some fun hobby that I put together using these two things. And so I just started photographing food for fun. I mean, it was really just something to break up the monotony in being a college student. So then after college, I decided to work in the restaurant industry. The more and more I worked in the restaurant industry, the more drained I got, the more I realized it was just, it's
a grind.
Taxing.
It is hard.
Yes.
You come across a lot of people in production that have had stints in restaurant industry because it's just one of those jobs. It's like a lot of creative people have had experience in restaurant industries, but wow, that is like, I think everybody should have to wait tables or be like a line chef for a while because you have such a different opinion and respect for just being nice to people when you do that. I mean, it's a great job to have for a short period of time, and then you get burnt out.
Totally. But I so agree. It's like, how many jobs can you say where you interact with so many different people where, like, no matter who that person is, your amount of money that you're getting is dependent on them. So you have to learn how to interact with people and sort of alter, kind of like your personality and your service style and just how you talk with people based on sort of your intuition and being in that service world. Yeah, I think it's a phenomenal thing for everybody to do just for a short period of time.
It really is true. Like, I never thought about it like that, but it kind of is. Like, it's almost uniquely suited to creative people because, I mean, every day we have a different boss. With every new client, we have a different
Yes.
boss. And it's kind of like that in the restaurant. It's like every new table is a different client for you, and you are reliant, or yeah, you're reliant on them liking you
Yeah.
to get
And you're
paid.
catering to them, and yeah, it's a really it's a bizarre thing. And I mean, there's all this. I could go off on a tangent about the restaurant industry. There's all this talk about what Danny Meyer's doing with
Who's Danny Myers?
he's this very famous restaurateur in New York, and now he started Shake Shack, so that's like one of his big things.
Oh, wow.
But he's shifting towards, and I think I mean, they've made the shift, but towards taking away tips at the restaurant and just paying employees what they've called a livable wage.
Hmm.
And it's interesting. It's like a lot of people have been upset about it because they've made less money from it, but a lot of people like it because it takes away a lot of that stress. But
Hmm.
anyways, tangent.
That's interesting. I didn't hear that. I'm looking him up
Yeah.
right now. Yeah, that is interesting. Does anybody else
Yeah.
do that? Would he be the first?
He was the first big person to do it and to push it, and it started this movement. And now, I wouldn't say a lot of restaurants are doing it, but there are quite a few restaurants that have adopted this.
Hmm.
But I mean, but it has been met with weirdly a lot of pushback from people who are in the restaurant industry, not even just diners or guests or whatever.
So you're doing your blog, it's getting successful, the photography looks great, people love it. What did you think at that time? I mean, there must have been a point where you're like, all right, I have something and I need to do something with it. That's kind of a crossroads point for people. And you've clearly chosen a direction, but I'd love to know what your thought process was at that time when you knew it was time to make a change.
Absolutely. So it's kind of unique in terms of the way that I decided to go full time. So the trajectory with most food bloggers is they do their blog and then they start putting ads on their blog, so they start monetizing, and then maybe they start working with brands. And then the usual tipping point is once you make the same amount of money that you're making in your corporate job, or it seems like you're like really getting close, that's when people usually quit their corporate jobs and then continue on with their blogs.
Hmm.
So the way that my story differs is that I was working in the restaurant industry and just totally defeated. And I was doing a combination of catering and events, and then also social media and marketing. So I quit and I didn't really have anything going on. I had loved doing my blog, but again, it was completely a hobby. It was never something I thought about as a career.
Yeah.
And I decided to give myself 2 months to see if I could sort of turn it into something that could make money. So the day I quit my job, I went home and I went on Google and I typed in how to make money on a food blog. I had
Wow.
no idea what I was doing. But what I did know is that I was getting this average of like 30,000 page views a month just from basically doing nothing. And I knew of food bloggers who, I had been following who clearly were making this into a career. So I gave myself 2 months, and I think by not really having anything to fall back on, I was actually not forced, because I was very happy to do it, but forced to really put in 110%. And I think because of that, that's something that really was really unique to my situation, because all of these people sort of had proven concept with what they were doing, and I hadn't. And so I only had this small amount of time to be able to do it before basically the money ran out, and I had to go find a real job.
And just
So
building up the blog, building up views,
yes.
getting advertisers, all that kind of stuff. That's
Yes.
where it started.
Yeah. So I did a lot of research. I reached out to a few bloggers who I knew had made this switch to full time, and basically emailed them and asked them what their best advice was. And I hate emailing people when you're just like, how can I be better? I think
How
it's
can I
really,
do what you
yeah,
do?
yeah. I think it's really important to ask really pointed questions, just because you don't want to waste someone's time, and I mean they're giving you free advice. So I was like, who should I go to for advertising? What should I do in terms of uh like Lightroom, Photoshop, like things like that. And I started hustling. I started getting work, and I thought it was really important to for those first 2 months to not focus on connecting with brands, which is a main way of how food bloggers make money, because I wanted to really build up this wealth of content that I felt really good about, that was very recent and relevant, and then be able to go and start saying to brands, hey, look what I can do.
Okay, so I want to talk about now, you have people coming to your website, you have your food blog going on, obviously great photos, but it has expanded. It's expanded into workshops, it's expanded into like a lifestyle section, and it's sort of become like a hub of much more than just food. When did you decide to make that transition and why?
Yeah. So the transition happened, I would say, pretty naturally over time. I, s- if we go back to sort of where I started out, like I started this blog because I had this passion for photography, and food was very much the outlet, or the creative sort of way that I express that. But photography is my passion first and foremost, and so as I was doing my blog, I've always enjoyed creating recipes, but that's not like doing a cookbook. Yeah, maybe I'll do it one day, but that's not like my be all end all. It's doing things involving photography. So I would say like the third year mark when I was full time, I started really thinking about ways that I could do more in terms of teaching photography and sort of turning this more into a an educational sort of thing, because it's one thing to be putting out content constantly and constantly and constantly, but it's another to be able to then sort of teach people how to do that themselves, and to be able to grow, and also for me it's really rewarding to take what I've learned and really put it into some sort of like streamlined process, I guess. So I started thinking about ways that I could basically teach people food photography. And I think it really for me took 3 years to feel comfortable and feel like I was in a place where I felt good enough about my work. I think, and I'm sure that the people that you talk to and yourself and all of these creatives can attest to this, but it's one thing to have people tell you you're doing a good job. And it's another thing for you to feel like, okay, finally, like, yes, this is what it's like this almost aha moment. Like, this is what I've been trying to do all along. And
Mm.
like, oh, yeah, like you almost like, it's like achieving a personal goal. And and I had been asking people, "Oh, when are you gonna do an ebook? When are you gonna, do more food photography posts and all this stuff?" And I never, up until that 3-year mark, wasn't feeling super confident in myself because I knew I could be better. And I still know that my photography can improve, but I finally feel like I'm at a place where I've been doing this long enough. I know enough. I feel confident in my abilities, and now it's time to it's time to teach.
And,
So,
and you're doing that through the foodtographyschool.com
yeah.
website, which is a great resource because people can join your classes and learn how to
Yes.
do this thing.
Yeah. So it started off basically wanting to teach people in this intimate setting. So I worked with my assistant at the time, and we created these in person workshops. And there were 4-day workshops where we had people fly in on Friday and, oh, I guess, sorry, 3 days. Fly in on Friday, and then do work all day Saturday and Sunday, and then leave that night. And it was great, but we were super limited to the amount of people we could teach. And we were looking at like 15 people, and it was also incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
We were having to charge $2,000 for people to do this workshop, and then we were only making about 30%, if that,
Wow.
on the entire process, which, when you're talking about like you're bringing in 30,000, but then you're only like netting about 10, it's just kind of like, man, I feel like there's a better way to do this.
Yeah, yeah.
So Foodtography School today is a 4-week virtual course, and it teaches food photography as a skill. So we do things like composition and lighting and color stories and mood board work and visual branding. And then it also teaches food photography as a business. So we go into, best practices for social media, the importance of um, branding in general. And then we talk about sort of like how to price your work, how to reach out to clients. Even we give people like a pitch email. We talk about media kits and all these sort of like buzzwordy things that you really need in order to make food photography into your career.
Hmm.
And so it's this course that we're able to teach to hundreds of students at a time, in a way that's still super interactive. It's super community based. We have a Facebook group, so people can post their photos and ask for group critique and things like that. And it's turned into this really amazing, amazing thing. And it's my favorite part of my business now.
So let's talk about some of those elements. And let's start with the photography. We'll certainly talk about the business too. But the photography itself, can you give us some tips and pointers on some of the basics about shooting food? I think something that a lot of people in this audience here may not do all the time.
Yes. Oh, my favorite. Okay, let's do it. So the first thing when shooting food, I think that's super important is, unlike pretty much every other type of photography, because you're working with something that's edible, you really need to stay true to the colors and the look of that thing.
Hmm.
So with portraiture, with landscapes, with, I mean, yeah, I'd say pretty much any other subset of photography, you can put this sort of like creative, cool, colorful spin on your work. You can make your photo look really gritty. You can have it be really antiquey. You can do cool like two-tone things. But with food photography, you really have to strike a balance of having a personal touch, but also staying really true to the food that you see in front of you.
Hmm.
So the quickest way to do that is to go to a window and photograph in really good natural light. Anything that involves like incandescent or halogen or whatever, like any artificial light just doesn't look as good. So natural light is like key number one for food photography. And then the next thing is really making sure that when you're photographing, you're not doing like weird angles. One thing we teach in our courses, I mean, there's really 3 main angles for food photography. There's a bird's eye view. So, creating flat lays. There's a 45-degree angle. So shooting your photos, I mean, basically from being 45 degrees above your food. And then like doing a straight on shot. So where you're, right at the same level as where your food is. And you don't need more than those 3 shots. You don't need to do weird, like, half turns to the right or like putting it, it's really much more cut and dry than I think a lot of photographers are used to, because you're used to finding all these really unique perspectives and angles. And with food photography, it's much less about that, and it's much more about being able to enticingly photograph what's in front of you with props, with textures, with, contrasting colors and things like that. And then the third thing that I'd say is, when you're shooting food photography, you want to make sure that you strike this balance between simplicity, because you want to, pay homage to the dish that's in front of you. You don't need to go crazy with props, but you also want to really bring in this element of sort of like community almost. And what I
Hmm.
mean by that is, when you have, say, like one dish in front of you versus when you have one dish and then in the corner of your frame a hint of a second dish, it's like it just, the emotional attachment that you feel to that photo is like, it's crazy.
Really?
And that's because food is such a communal thing. And it's something that since the beginning of time, I mean, we've been doing with our people and with our family and with our friends. And so when you photograph food, making sure that you have something that signals sort of like this group communal eating is something that's super important and just instantly makes a much more emotional connection.
You are listening to the PremiumBeat.com Song of the Week. It's called Yes She Can by Teeny Music. PremiumBeat.com is where to go for all of your royalty-free music and sound effects. If you go to their website, you'll have access to thousands of royalty-free tracks for as low as $49 each. And it's not just a track. No. You get cut downs. A 10, a 15, a 30 sometimes. They give you loop sets so you have all the assets you need to customize a track to fit your project perfectly. But it's all about variety and it's all about quality, and that's what you're going to get at PremiumBeat.com. So check it out. PremiumBeat.com. Let's take a second and talk about Hedge.video. What is Hedge? Well, it's a backup software for filmmakers. So here's the thing. I use Hedge all the time on set because my camera operators give me their media cards. My audio person gives me their media card, and I want to make sure I have backups before I give those cards back to them. And the best thing about Hedge is that you can import multiple sources and send it to multiple destinations at the same time. So I get their cards, I plug in my hard drives, I set Hedge, and I just sit there and let it go. It's amazing. I do it over lunch a lot because I also have the Hedge Connect app for iOS. So when I am doing a transfer, I get notification right on my phone when it's done. So I don't have to sit there and look at it. I just get the notification and I know I am set. So you can create multiple backups from multiple destinations all at the same time. That is huge. It is super fast and it's incredibly reliable. So when I make these transfers, I have peace of mind knowing that everything has been done correctly. And when I give those cards back to my camera operators, they can clear them, no problem at all. That's why I love those guys. Now, they're constantly updating their app, so I strongly encourage you to go over there and get yourself a license. They have a free trial available. You can get project licensing if you just want to use it for one project. But the best news is you get 20% off the full price by going to hedge.video/Go Creative Show. Simple as that, 20% off right off the bat. Hedge.video/Go Creative Show. Head over there, try it out. I know you'll love it. All right, there's so much more to talk about with Sarah Fennell, so let's get right back to it. I'm looking through your Instagram as we talk. Instagram /Broma Bakery, Broma Bakery. And I didn't notice these. I mean, certainly I noticed the natural light, but I didn't notice some of the framing that you're talking about. I mean, I saw it, but I didn't look at it as like a strategy or a trend, but it does. It's like you know that there's other things going on around the frame. Very few of your photos have an isolated dish and that's it. And when it does, there's a kind of a specific reason for it. There's a unique shape or there's something else going on.
Right. Or it's like super textured or something. Yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. That's one thing that I love talking about, just sort of the psychological connection that we have to food because it is so unique. I mean, so with portraiture, you're instantly judging sort of who's in front of you as a viewer, right? But with food, it's something that we all need to survive. So whether you like, cilantro or not, or, whatever's in front of you, there's something about it that pulls you in. And so your job as a food photographer is very much figuring out what those things are in that specific dish that pulls you in, and those things that, bring out that emotional connection between the viewer and food.
So lighting wise, just to take a step back,
Yeah.
I know you're saying natural light near a window, but do you do situations where you're bringing in, daylight, LEDs, something like that? You don't have a window around you. You're in a studio. It's nighttime. Like, what do you do in those cases?
Personally, I don't. I only shoot in natural light.
Really?
Yeah. So I think it's something it's hard with a lot of our students because some of them are like still in full-time jobs and can only photograph on the weekend, but in my experience, I I I think there's maybe like one photographer that I know that is able to photograph in artificial light and have it look as good as natural light.
Hmm.
So I think it is so important to be able to photograph in natural light. So if that means that you can only photograph on Sundays, then, you know, cook as much as you can on Saturday night or something like that, or, early in the day on Sunday and then shoot 5 things on Sunday. That natural light is just like that's gold in food photography.
What about the props in the set, the
Mm.
arrangements of the food? What kind
Mm.
of strategies are going into that?
So with props, I've found that a neutral color palette is best. So in terms of actual colors, focusing on things that are like light grayish blues or even like dark grayish blues, um, more of that sort of natural, like burlappy color that you get in
Hmm.
a lot of linens, or even just doing sort of like an eggshelly white for a linen or something like that. And then in terms of surfaces, same thing, sticking with a natural color palette. So and just natural sort of organic elements. So doing either marble or slate or wood, stone, anything that has that organic look to it. And one thing that I did a lot when I first started out, because when you're first starting out, you gotta like balance your budget somewhere, and with props it can get so expensive. So I would go to Home Depot and I would go to their tile section and I would just get tiles from Home Depot,
Hmm.
and I'd put 2 or 3 tiles together, and then if what I was photographing was really large and I needed to show sort of like a seam in a tile, I would then just clone stamp that in Lightroom to make it look seamless.
Yeah.
And then in terms of bowls and plates and all that fun stuff, the best bowls and plates and serveware that you can get is going to be something that's matte because you don't want that shiny look.
Mm.
That's going to take away from your food. You're going to get weird glare. So that's why I think a lot of people gravitate so much towards antiques in food photography because they have that natural. Is patina the word? I don't
Yeah.
know that like
Yeah. Like
that. Yeah,
like a wear and tear.
yeah, yeah. So, a lot of sort of like local potters will have that less shiny look as opposed to the mass manufactured plates and bowls that you can get. Specific places though that I recommend for props. Crate and Barrel has fantastic props. Especially they have like these, I think it's part of like their wedding registry collections. But you can buy just individual pieces from each of their collections, which is like game changing because they're like $5 to $10 each.
Hmm.
And then I used to shop at Home Goods a lot, not so much recently. Honestly, probably Crate and Barrel for the majority of the stuff I have. West Elm has some really nice plates and things like that. And then I'll shop on Amazon too. Um, Amazon has great things like enamel baking pans, or I'll get a lot of my glassware on Amazon and things like that.
Now I noticed some of the food that you have here are in different states. Sometimes you have the entire meal. Sometimes you have like a cookie with a bite coming out of it, or a piece of cake with a
Yeah.
fork in it. What are some of the thoughts that are going through your mind as you're doing this to decide, am I going to show the item in its full, complete state, or am I going to kind of break it up a little bit?
I think it's something that really depends on what I'm photographing. So, a cookie with a bite out of it, it's usually because there's a piece of chocolate in it. And it's like, who doesn't want to see that drippy chocolate?
Yeah.
Usually when something is in the process of, being broken up or looking like it's eaten, it's because there's something that you can't see that's, inside that you can't see when that thing is whole.
Mm.
But in general, I mean, again, going back to this idea of like finding this emotional connection between your viewer and food, we're photographing edible things. So what better way to show that something is appetizing than to show it being eaten? So having even down to, like sometimes when I'm photographing cookies or anything with a little more of like a crumb in it, I'll set aside a cookie, I'll break it up like in my hand, and I'll just drizzle crumbs onto my board or whatever I'm photographing, because it brings in that element of something that is, being enjoyed and going through this process of consumption.
Mm. I want to talk about your post techniques when you're editing these photos.
Yeah.
When I look through this, there are definitely some trends. There's an overall brightness in it, but it's not oversaturated at all. Like everything looks very natural, but everything looks really bright and enticing. Like you want to reach into these photos and start eating. And I'd love to know how you're achieving that on the post-production side.
Totally. So I edit completely in Lightroom. The only time when I'll go into Photoshop is if I'm working with a client and there's some like, shift this way, or so it's really
Fixing things.
Fixing, yeah.
Yeah.
But for the most part, when I'm shooting, it's all in Lightroom for edits. So I really love that bright look, but I think what so many, I would say, like more amateur photographers do when they go for the bright look is they don't keep the contrast and keep those really beautiful, rich blacks. So one thing that I love being able to reference is Ansel Adams has this idea of like the zone system. So it's that in terms of the visible light spectrum, there's zones 0 through 10. So 0 is absolute black and 10 is absolute white. And his idea when he went through his post-processing, process is that every photo should have a little bit of every zone in it. And so some photos are going to, rely more heavily on the darker zones, so 0 through 3, and some are going to rely on the lighter zones, so like 7 through 10, and some are going to be right in the middle for that less contrasty look. But no matter what, every photo should ideally have some of a little bit of everything in it. And so even though I really bump up my exposure, I make sure that in Lightroom I'm pulling down my blacks. And then to combat that a little bit, I'll pull my black slider down and then my shadow slider up a little bit. And that makes it so it creates a nice separation between these really rich blacks without all of my shadows having that richness. And I do the same with my whites and my highlights. So I'll bring my highlights down and my whites up. So that's where I get those really bright whites without overexposing all of, my higher zoned parts of my image. And then in terms of color, so most photographers will, I think, just quickly bring up exposure, then bring up their contrast slider. I barely touch my contrast slider. I rely on that highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks to sort of separate. And by doing it that way, you end up, I feel like, messing less with the color in your image. I've noticed that when I'm using my contrast slider exclusively, I start to get some wonky saturations in my colors.
Yeah.
And so that's like a huge thing for me. And then I also do a lot in my HSL panel. So primarily, because
And explain to us what HSL is.
Oh yeah. The hue, saturation, and luminance panel in Lightroom. So that's basically where you're doing all your color editing. So hue is sort of the hue that the color takes on. So there's RGB sliders. And then you can slide your red slider so it looks more orange red, or you can slide it so it looks more violet red. And you can do that with all your colors. So that's hue. And then saturation is the amount of white in a color. So you can effectively make a color look darker or lighter than it is. So, going from like a medium blue to a lighter blue or to a darker blue. And then saturation is just the power in a color. So I'll play around with those sliders a lot. My go-to is playing with my blue sliders and basically taking my blue saturation almost all the way down, because a lot of the surfaces that I shoot on, even the marble white surface that I shoot on, it naturally gets picked up as blue in my camera, and I mean in any camera. And so I'll pull that almost all the way down, and then I'll pull the luminance. So this amount of whiteness in a color, I'll pull that almost all the way up. And that is where I get that signature sort of bright white look, because you basically erase any blues and you translate your blues to white, and you just make them basically glow. And so that's my number one editing tip.
Yeah, as you're explaining this, I'm looking through the photos and I'm like, that's it. That's what I'm seeing. Because the whites are so brilliantly white that it's really intriguing. It's like, I see it does very much feel like it has a Crate and Barrel-y feel to it, for sure. It has that like white, I don't know, it's just, but the
it's
whiteness
like a
in
clean
it,
crispness.
it's weird. It's like, it's incredibly colorful, but it's not an oversaturated image. It's that's the balance that I'm most intrigued by here. It's like nothing feels artificial. It looks exactly like you think it looks in your mind, so it looks natural, but it's also incredibly vibrant.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I would say if you're just starting to get into food photography, really play around with that HSL panel. It's a total game changer. And especially those blues. The other thing that I would say that I alter primarily is like my reds and yellows. Oranges I found are really, really difficult to mess around with. There's just something about orange that it looks off if you move it around. But I'll mess with my reds and yellows a lot. So like when I'm shooting brownies, I will usually either because brownies tend to come off in the orange and red color family. So I'll either pull my red luminance way up and again get that sort of glowiness to the reds. And so then to combat that, I pull my red saturation down a bit, or I will make my red hue fall more towards I want to say orange. Yeah, like the orange end of the color spectrum. And that'll just make it feel a little bit richer. But just finding ways, exactly as you said, to really bring out the natural feel of that photo. So it is how it looks in your mind. It's just like pumped up.
And what are you shooting on?
I shoot on a Canon 5D Mark IV. And then I switch between, I have a 24 to 70 millimeter 2.8 for a lens, and then a 100 millimeter 2.8 for a lens. And then I just got a 50 millimeter 1.2 in the mail today, and I'm so excited about that.
So that's your kit, now 3 lenses.
But
and that
I mean,
camera.
yeah, but it's just the 2. Yeah, and with, the 24 to 70, I'm obsessed with. It's just so versatile and produces an amazing quality image.
Yeah.
And I love that, I can take it when I travel, and I can photograph food or people or landscapes, and all of it's going to come out well. And I love that, I can also just use it in everyday food shooting at home. But the one thing about it is it's obviously not a macro lens. So I was really looking for something to get me really close to the action. So that's why I went for the 100. And I almost love the 100 more than the 24 to 70. I found that the overall crispness is a little bit better with 100, but I think that's just because it's a prime lens. But yeah, that's my kit.
That's an in pretty impressively small kit.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, that that it's a fairly well-known camera. I mean, a lot of people have that camera. A lot of people have those lenses. I mean, people can do this. In this audience, you probably have what you need to do this. You just need a little bit of maybe some guidance on the post-production techniques and get yourself out to a window. All too often, we're used to bringing our own lights. But yeah, I mean, that's encouraging to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I think that's one thing that's really cool about food photography. I mean, you can do it from anywhere. Like, you don't need a beautiful house. You don't need like this amazing studio or kitchen. Like, you need a window and you need some backgrounds.
I want to take a quick minute and talk about Shutterstock.com. Now, here's the thing. I go to Shutterstock.com, like you do, certainly for stock footage, and music, and images, but oftentimes I go there for inspiration. Now, that may sound kind of crazy, but think about it. They have over 8 million royalty-free video clips. Many of them are in 4K. Nearly 80,000 clips were added just last week. So they never, ever stop adding footage and images. And a lot of them are organized in these really great, very well curated collections. So like you go to their website, shutterstock.com, and then click on footage, and you're going to see a great selection of stuff to take a look at based on category. So like some of my favorites are Director's Choice, which is really the best of the best. That's where I go first. And it's in all sorts of categories. I mean, right now, World Football is one, patriotic scenes, water aerials, wedding stuff, food paradise, foodie's paradise. Actually, that's perfect for this episode. Look at that. Perfect. And then they also have other categories, technology, slow motion, business, animation. So you don't just have to wildly type into the search field and just see what happens. You can go directly to the categories. And that oftentimes gives me inspiration, especially when I'm putting together director's reels and I need to give reference images for projects that have yet to be shot. So I use it a lot just for that, just to help me share my vision with a potential client. Now, of course, the footage on there is really, really great. So even if I have to be using stock footage to supplement a piece I'm working on, I know that the stuff I'm going to find is going to match the quality of the work that I'm doing myself and with my team. Because the last thing you want is to put footage that's going to dumb down your piece. You want something of the same quality or better, and you're going to find it at Shutterstock.com. I always do, and I know you guys will too. So head over there, Shutterstock.com, look around, get some inspiration, buy some pieces, throw them into your projects, and I guarantee you're going to love them. And your clients will love it too. And that's really what this is all about. So head over there, Shutterstock.com. All right, we still have a little bit more with Sarah. Maybe we saved the best for last. Who knows? You're going to find out right now. Are you cooking all the food that you shoot?
I do. Yeah.
Jesus.
And it's been a process. I've never considered myself a cook, and I've always considered myself a baker, but I'm completely self-taught. It was a lot of trial and error in the beginning, and I think that is one reason why it did sort of take me 3 years to feel comfortable, because I was also really getting to feel comfortable with the food that I was making. And there's a lot to be said about, being a food photographer and not having food to work with. Like, you kind of, so we'll do these like live webinars for people interested in getting into Foodtography School, where we basically like just do a free 1 hour training on, we'd have like a bunch of different topics. And a lot of people are like, well, I want to be a food photographer, but I don't want to cook, or I'm not a good cook. And I kind of just like, my response to that is, it's kind of like, well, tough cookies, dude.
Yeah.
Like, you want to be a food photographer, you have to create your subject. Like, it's not my favorite part of my job, but it's become something that is so integral to what I do that like you just have to start learning how to cook.
You got to have
And I
something
mean,
to shoot for sure.
no, exactly. And there's definitely ways that you can do it, especially like with baked goods. You can go to local bakeries and you can get loaves of bread or things that they make or macaroons or cookies or brownies, and then you can take that home and photograph that. Like nobody's saying you have to go out and, learn everything. With cooking, it's a little bit harder because I feel like so much of it does need to be done in the home. But I think baking's actually a great way to start out in that sense, because you kind of like you can get something and wait to photograph it until you have time 2 days later.
Mm. In our last couple minutes, I would love to just give some parting words to the people out there that are interested in maybe getting into this arena, starting to do some food photography, potentially building a blog, building their online presence. Can you just give us a little bit of insight into the career of food photography? What happened? You have this talent, you shoot all this food, but you also need the career part. And what
Yes.
is that?
Yes, absolutely. So what's amazing about the day and age that we're in right now is that we have Instagram at our disposal and social media in general. But I'd say Instagram as photographers being the most visual. Um, and brands are now aware that it's really important to partner with influencers. So when you think about it in sort of classical marketing, brands would say, let's use like a newspaper subscription, or advertising in a newspaper as our example,
Yeah.
and you could advertise in a newspaper that circulates to 3 million people, but the actual market segment that you are, you are looking to target might only be like even 50,000 of those people.
Mm.
And what's so unique about influencers and people who have social media presences is that they basically have a very specific and saturated market segment at their disposal. So even though you might not have 3 million people that follow you, even if you have, 10, 20,000, that's 10 or 20,000 people in the exact segment that brands are looking to target.
Mm.
So knowing that, it's almost, it's almost, it, it makes people who feel like they have small followings, I think, have a little more confidence because yeah, it's small, but it's small and it's very targeted. So the biggest thing in terms of making this into a career is reaching out to brands and working with brands. That is how almost all food bloggers make money, and how a lot of food photographers make money. So reaching out to brands and basically either offering to photograph existing recipes that the brand has, or offering to come up with new recipes and photographing it using the brand's products, and then allowing them to use those images to have them circulate on their social, on their website, whatever. And then also what the brand gets out of it too is being able to you know have this group of people that you are circulating their product to. So it's this really cool, multifaceted way to work with a brand and provide value that is all sort of based within food photography. And then the other thing too is I think that if you want to make this into a business, you really want to think about what your strengths are. I mean, there's definitely people who do not feel comfortable with cooking. And after hearing this, they're like, yeah, that's cool, but I'm not going to start cooking. So then you want to think about ways where you can maybe photograph for restaurants or photograph for small businesses or things like that. There's so many different ways to make profit as a food photographer. It's really, I would say, about figuring out where your strengths are and where sort of you can shine the most.
So you've worked with a whole bunch of really great brands. You were just recently in Paris working for, what was the company again?
For Bon Maman, they're a preserves company.
And that's one of many. Can you name a few of some of your bigger clients that we may all know?
Yeah, so some of my long-term clients are Sur La Table, Chobani, Bob's Red Mill, Simply Oranges, Delalo, Absolute Vodka, Blue Diamond Almond Breeze, Olympus, Ghirardelli, and Kroger.
Wow. I
Yeah.
mean, these are not small mom and pop restaurants.
Yeah.
This is the real deal, and it's I think probably the most interesting thing that I'm learning while talking to you is that you really don't need much. Certainly, you need talent.
Yes.
But you don't need much. Just talent, a little bit of will, some equipment, a window, the sun,
Yeah.
and you can really make something happen. And you're certainly a testament to that. And that's incredible. It's incredible.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
So where can people go to learn more about you, and specifically where they can learn more about how to become a better food photographer?
Yes. So you can learn more about me at all my handles are Broma Bakery, Broma Bakery. And then if you're interested in learning about our food photography school, it's called Foodtography School. So photography, yeah. Those you can find both on Instagram or on our websites, bromabakery.com and foodtographyschool.com.
I love it. Foodtographyschool.com. I'll put a link to that in the show notes for you guys. Sarah, thank you so much for being on. That was really great.
No, thank you, Ben. This was awesome.
Now, when do I get to eat some of this food? That's the question.
No, we got to arrange for that.
We do. Thanks for being on. We'll have to have you back.
Thank you.
How cool is that? Now you can all become better food photographers. So get out there, get by a window, go make something, and shoot the hell out of that thing. I want to thank Sarah Fennell for joining us today, sharing some tips. You can find her at foodtographyschool.com and bromabakery.com. We'll have links to it in the show notes, of course. But while you're online searching around, why don't you find Matt Russell? Because he's the one that mixes and masters and make this show sound so good. And here's the thing, you can hire him for your projects. He does all the mixing for my work with BC Media Productions as well. So it's not just the podcast. He's a busy, busy man, but always has room for new clients, right? Don't we all? So find him over at gainstructure.com and on Twitter at gainstructure. And while you're there, go to @GoCreativeShow. I want to thank our sponsors, Rule Boston Camera, Hedge.video, Newsshooter.com, Shutterstock.com, and Premium Beat. Without them, we wouldn't exist. So support those that support us.